I fixed their spillway, and they fined my daughter's kayak. I thought sending my HOA an $11,000 bill would be uncomfortable, but fair. I had just paid out of pocket to save their lake road, their homes, and their emergency access. But Vivian Hartley looked at my invoice like it was trash and said the board never authorized it. That was when doubt turned into suspicion, because she kept saying controlled property, never owned property. So I stopped arguing, opened the county records, and found the one strip of land that changed everything. Stay with me, because by the time the sheriff read that deed out loud, Cottonwood Lake did not belong to Vivian's story anymore. And if you like real land, quiet courage, and justice done by paperwork, subscribe and ride along for the next one. I thought the $11,000 bill would make them uncomfortable. I did not think it would make them stupid. The invoice sat on the folding table between me and Vivian Hartley, clean, stapled, itemized down to the last load of crushed rock. Behind her, the Cottonwood Shores HOA board sat in a straight line under the clubhouse lights, all polished nameplates and tight mouths. Outside, beyond the windows, Cottonwood Lake was turning bronze in the evening sun, calm as if it had not tried to tear itself loose 3 days earlier. Vivian barely looked at the papers. She slid one finger over the total, lifted her eyes to me, and said, "The board doesn't pay for work we didn't authorize." For a second, I honestly thought I had misheard her. $11,000 had come out of my account because the spillway below that lake had been failing, because the ranch road was softening from underneath, because 3 homes down by the lower pasture would have taken water through their back doors if that embankment had let go, because emergency vehicles would have had one bad road and no second chance. But Vivian said it like I had painted my mailbox the wrong shade. Unauthorized. I looked at the other board members. Not one of them met my eyes. Greg Daly stared at his pen. Linda Cross pretended to read the agenda. Mark Ellison shifted in his chair like the wood under him had suddenly gotten hot. I said, "You received the engineer's report." Vivian gave me the kind of smile people use when they want witnesses to think they are being patient. "We received several documents from you, Mr. Keller. You received a written warning that the spillway could fail. The board reviews all infrastructure matters through proper procedure." "Proper procedure?" I repeated. My voice stayed calm, but I felt something hard move behind my ribs. The old frontier kind of anger. The kind my father used to call quiet thunder. It does not make a man swing. It makes him count. Vivian folded her hands. Her nails were pale pink, perfect, not a speck of mud under them. "You chose to hire a contractor without board approval. You chose to make modifications to HOA-controlled property. The financial consequences of that choice are not the association's responsibility." HOA-controlled property. That phrase landed wrong. Not because I understood why yet. I didn't, not fully. But after 30 years working irrigation, electrical, and ranch water systems across Montana, I knew when a person was using language to cover a weak spot. Controlled was not the same as owned. I looked down at the invoice again. $11,000. Culvert reinforcement. Spillway stabilization. Erosion barrier. Emergency mobilization. 2 long days in the mud with Travis Boone's crew and 1 storm rolling in over the ridge like judgment. The repair held. The road held. The lower homes stayed dry. And Vivian Hartley wanted to punish me for saving them. Earl Mason stood near the back wall, arms crossed over his fire department jacket. Retired fire captain, 70 years old, and still built like a fence post. He had been the first man besides me to say out loud that if Lake Road collapsed, an ambulance would never reach the east side in time. He gave me a small shake of the head. "Not now," it said. He was right. Vivian wanted a fight in that room. She wanted me angry. She wanted me loud. She wanted a quote she could put in the minutes and call threatening behavior at the next meeting. So I did not give her one. I gathered the invoice, Ron Calder's engineering report, the certified mail receipts, the photos, and the proof of payment. I squared the pages into a neat stack. The room stayed silent enough that I could hear the old ceiling fan clicking above us. Vivian leaned back slightly, already mistaking silence for defeat. "Is there anything else, Mr. Keller?" I looked at her for a long moment. There was plenty else. There was the crack in the spillway she had ignored. There was the water that had cut under the road while she talked about boat covers. There was my daughter Nora standing in our kitchen asking what would happen if nobody fixed it. There was the $11,000 I could not afford to lose, paid because somebody had to act before Cottonwood Lake turned into a weapon. But none of that would matter tonight. Not to her. I stood. "No," I said. "That answers my question." Vivian's smile sharpened. "Good. Then the board considers this matter closed." That was her mistake. She thought closed meant finished. I slipped the folder under my arm and walked out of the clubhouse without raising my voice. The gravel outside was dry on top, but still dark underneath from the storm. My pickup sat under the cottonwoods, dust on the windshield, mud on the tires, a contractor's receipt on the seat beside my old work gloves. Across the road, Cottonwood Lake glittered behind the fence line. 24 homes had been sold on that view. 24 families paid lake fees every year because Vivian told them the HOA protected it. I stood there with one hand on the truck door and looked back at the clubhouse. Why was she so calm? Why refuse a bill that saved the community from a disaster she had been warned about? Why use the word controlled instead of owned? I got in the truck, started the engine, and did not drive home right away. I opened the folder again under the dome light and looked at the denial notes Vivian had scribbled across the agenda copy. Unauthorized access work, HOA-controlled lake corridor, board authority preserved. There it was again. Corridor. I had spent half my life learning that water always finds the weak place. So does power. So does truth, if a man is patient enough to follow it. Vivian Hartley had just refused to pay the man who saved her lake. By morning, I was going to find out whether it had ever been her lake at all. But to understand why that question mattered, you have to go back 6 weeks, to the first crack in the old spillway below Cottonwood Lake. I found it on a Tuesday evening after work. I had gone down there to check the ranch road because the last rain had left a soft dip near the curve by the cottonwoods. That road ran along the lower edge of the lake, past 3 homes, then east toward the old pasture gate. It was the only clean way in for fire trucks, ambulances, utility crews, and half the people who lived on that side of Cottonwood shores. The spillway sat below the road, gray concrete half buried in mud and weeds, carrying overflow from the lake into a creek bed that cut through the valley. It had been there longer than most of the houses. Everybody drove over it. Nobody looked at it. That evening, I looked. A dark split ran down the concrete lip. Water had carved a hollow beneath the edge, not wide enough to swallow a truck yet, but wide enough to worry any man who had spent his life working around water. The soil below the road was soft. Too soft. I pushed the heel of my boot into it and watched brown water seep around the leather. That was not a cosmetic problem. That was a countdown. I took photos from every angle. The crack, the washed-out dirt, the exposed pipe, the wet scar running under the roadbed. Then I sent them to the HOA management office with a short message. Drainage failure forming below Lake Road. Needs inspection before next major rainfall. I expected a reply the next morning. Nothing came. 2 days later, I sent another email, this time copying Vivian Hartley directly. Her answer came through Denise at the management office. Mr. Keller, the board has received your concern and will add it to the agenda. Agenda. That word should have warned me. A failing Spillway does not care about agendas. The following weekend, I saw Earl Mason standing near the lower bend with his old fire captain's jacket zipped halfway up, staring at the same damage. Earl had lived in Cottonwood Shores since before the HOA learned how to print violation notices. He was the kind of man who noticed where water flowed and where smoke would go before anybody else smelled it. "You report this?" he asked. "Twice." He bent down, touched the wet dirt with 2 fingers, and rubbed it together. "They answer? They'll add it to the agenda." Earl gave a dry laugh without smiling. "If that road drops, an ambulance won't make the east side." I looked toward the 3 homes below the grade. Quiet porches, fresh-cut lawns, a red tricycle beside one garage. Normal life sitting downhill from a lake nobody was protecting. "How bad?" I asked. Earl stood slowly. "Bad enough that if I were still on duty, I'd be asking why nobody had cones out here." That was the first time I felt something colder than concern. I sent another packet that night. Photos, a map, a note about emergency access, and a request for immediate inspection. I sent it by email, then printed it and mailed it certified the next morning. 4 days passed. Then Vivian answered with one sentence. "The board will review drainage priorities at the next scheduled meeting. Not emergency review, not inspection, not contractor estimate. Priorities." That same week, I watched an HOA crew repaint the clubhouse sign by the entrance. 2 men in clean shirts, fresh white lettering, Vivian standing there with a clipboard, nodding like the community had just been saved from disgrace. I pulled over, rolled down my window, and called out, "Vivian, did you get the Spillway photos?" She turned slowly. Sunglasses, pressed blouse, that polished smile. "We did, Mason. It needs more than review." "That's your opinion. It's water undermining a road." Her smile did not move. "And the board has procedures for infrastructure concerns." Behind her, the new sign gleamed in the sun. Cottonwood Shores. Private lake community. Private lake. Private rules. Private little kingdom. I wanted to argue right there by the fence, but Earl's warning sat in my head. If she wanted procedure, I needed records. If she wanted silence, I needed proof that I had spoken. So I nodded once and drove away. Over the next 2 weeks, the crack widened. Not dramatically. Not the kind of thing that scared people passing at 30 miles an hour. But every time I checked it, more soil was gone. Water was doing what water does. Patient work. Quiet damage. Then my daughter Nora walked down there with me one evening, her kayak paddle still in the bed of my truck. She stood at the edge of the road and looked at the wet hollow under the concrete. "That's bad, isn't it? Bad enough. Why haven't they fixed it?" I looked across Cottonwood Lake, smooth and bright under the evening sky. 24 homes paid fees to protect that water, that road, that view, and not one board member had walked down here with a shovel, a cone, or a plan. "I don't know," I told her, but that was not true anymore. By then, I knew one thing for certain. The Spillway was not being missed. It was being ignored. And if the board was willing to ignore a danger everyone could see, I started wondering what else they were hiding where nobody bothered to look. The next morning, I called Ron Calder. Ron had spent 32 years working drainage, culverts, county roads, and flood control across eastern Montana. He was not dramatic. He did not sell fear. He was the kind of man who could look at a creek crossing, spit once into the dirt, and tell you which side would wash out first. We met at the Spillway at 7:30. Ron stepped out of his old county green pickup with a field notebook, a measuring rod, and boots that had seen more bad ground than most engineers see on paper. He did not say much at first. He walked the road edge, crouched near the concrete lip, checked the exposed pipe, then drove the metal rod into the soft bank beside the culvert. It sank too easily. That was the first bad sign. He pulled it out, mud clinging halfway up the steel, and looked toward the lake. "How long have they known?" "About 3 weeks from me," I said. "Longer from Earl, maybe. He says he mentioned drainage last fall." Ron turned back to the crack. "And nobody inspected it?" "Not that I've seen." He made one short note in his book. Not angry, not surprised, just precise. That worried me more. We walked down below the road where runoff had carved a brown channel through the grass. Ron pointed to the washed-out pocket under the concrete. "See that void?" I nodded. "That's not surface erosion anymore. Water's moving under the structure. Every storm is taking material with it. Right now, the road is holding because the top layer still looks normal. But underneath, it's losing support." I looked at Lake Road above us. A school bus passed in the distance, slow over the curve, yellow body rocking once as it crossed the weak spot. Ron watched it too. "If that gives way," he said, "it won't give way politely." That sentence went straight into my chest. He took measurements for another 20 minutes. Width of the washout, drop from roadbed to channel, pipe exposure, flow path, distance to the lower homes. He did not waste a word. When he finished, we stood beside my truck. "You want the clean version or the written version?" he asked. "Both. The clean version is this. The HOA should have had a contractor out here already. Barricades at minimum. Temporary stabilization before the next heavy rain. If they keep waiting, they're gambling with that road. And the written version? I'll have it to you tomorrow." He closed his notebook, then added, "Send it certified. Email is fine, but certified mail makes people remember they were warned." I almost laughed. "You think I'm headed for a fight?" Ron looked at the lake, then at the clubhouse roof visible beyond the trees. "No," he said. "I think you're already in one. They just haven't admitted it yet." His report arrived the next afternoon. I read it at my kitchen table while Nora did homework across from me. The words were professional, but they cut clean. Progressive failure. Undermining of roadbed. Immediate corrective action recommended. Potential flooding of lower properties. Possible restriction of emergency access. Nora looked up when she heard the printer running. "That the report?" "Yeah. Is it bad?" I handed her the first page. She read slower than usual, lips pressed together. When she reached the line about emergency access, her eyes moved to the window, toward the lake. "Are you sending it to them?" "Right now." I sent Vivian the report by email. I copied Denise, the management office, the full board, and my own records. Then I printed 5 copies and mailed one certified to the HOA's registered address. 2 days later, the board meeting agenda was posted online. Item 1. Clubhouse flower beds. Item 2. Boat cover color compliance. Item 3. Mailbox trim standards. Item 7. Near the bottom, drainage concern, Lake Road. Concern. That was the word they chose after an engineer told them the road could fail. I went to the meeting. The clubhouse smelled like stale coffee and floor polish. 12 residents sat in folding chairs. Vivian sat at the front in a cream blazer, silver pen in hand, looking like she had never stepped in mud in her life. They spent 42 minutes on boat covers. 42 minutes while Cottonwood Lake pressed against a wounded spillway less than a quarter-mile away. When public comments opened, I stood and handed Ron's report to each board member. "This is not a concern," I said. "This is a failure in progress. The road needs immediate stabilization before the next major storm. Vivian glanced at the first page, then set it down. The board appreciates your input. It's not input. It's an engineer's warning. Her eyes lifted. Cold now. Mr. Keller, the board will review the matter through normal procedures. Normal procedures. The words hit harder than if she had shouted. Behind me, Earl Mason stood up slowly. With respect, Earl said, I ran fire response in this county for 28 years. If that road drops, you lose emergency access to the East homes. Vivian's smile tightened. Thank you, Earl. Your concern is noted. Earl stared at her. Nobody else spoke. That was the moment I understood Vivian was not waiting because she lacked information. She had the photos. She had the certified letters. She had Ron's report. She had a retired fire captain warning her in public. She knew. She just believed nobody in that room would force her to act. I sat back down, but I did not feel defeated. I felt something sharpening. After the meeting, Vivian stopped beside me near the door. You need to be careful, Mason, she said quietly. About what? Creating unnecessary panic. I looked past her toward the dark line of Cottonwood Lake behind the clubhouse windows. Panic isn't the problem, I said. Water is. Her face barely changed, but I saw it. A flash of irritation. Not fear yet. Not even close. That would come later. For now, she still thought she controlled the lake, the road, the board, and the story. I drove home with Ron's report on the passenger seat, and one decision settling hard in my mind. If the storm came before the HOA acted, I was done waiting for permission. 3 days later, the forecast turned from concern into a warning. A slow spring system was moving out of the mountains, carrying enough rain to make every low road in the county nervous. I checked the spillway after work and found fresh soil gone from beneath the concrete lip. The water had carved a deeper pocket under the road, and the shoulder had started to sag near the outside tire line. I took one more set of photos. Then I called Vivian. She did not answer. I called Denise at the management office. The board is aware of your concerns, Mr. Keller, she said. Denise, the road is undermined. I understand. No, you don't. If that culvert collapses, 3 homes get water and the east side loses access. A pause. Paper shuffled somewhere on her desk. I can forward another message to the board. That's not action. I'm not authorized to dispatch contractors. There it was. The same wall, just painted a different color. Authorization. That afternoon, I called Claire Whitman, a property rights attorney I had used years earlier when a utility company tried to run a line across my pasture without recording the easement properly. Claire did not waste words. Send me everything, she said. I emailed Ron's report, the photos, the certified receipts, and the HOA responses. An hour later, she called back. You have a documented hazard, she said. You have notice to the responsible party. You have an engineer recommending immediate corrective action. Can I hire the work myself? You're asking the wrong question. What's the right one? What happens if you don't? I looked out my kitchen window toward the dark line of Cottonwood Lake beyond the pasture fence. Claire continued, I'm not giving you blanket permission. But courts do not usually admire people who stand by and let preventable damage happen while everyone waits on a committee. That was as clear as a lawyer gets without handing you a loaded gun. I called Travis Boone next. Travis ran a site work company out of Miles City and had bailed me out twice on irrigation jobs when spring runoff chewed through ranch crossings. He met me at the spillway an hour before dark, wearing a canvas coat, jaw tight, eyes on the ground. He did not need long. You're out of time, he said. How fast can you stabilize it? He looked at the lake, then the road, then the lower homes. If I pull a crew and materials tonight, I can be here by sunrise. Culvert support, riprap, fabric, compacted fill, temporary erosion control. It won't be pretty, but it'll hold. How much? He wrote the estimate on the hood of his truck. $11,000. I stared at the number longer than I wanted to. $11,000 was not pocket money. It was fence repairs I had postponed. It was Nora's college account cushion. It was the kind of savings a widower keeps because when life has taken one person from your house, you learn not to trust easy days. Travis watched me without pushing. I need an answer tonight, he said. If I move equipment, I'm moving it. I took the estimate home and laid it on the kitchen table. Nora came in from the porch, hair still damp from the lake wind, and stopped when she saw my face. What happened? I slid the paper toward her. She read the amount first. Everybody does. Then she read the work description. You're thinking about paying it? I'm thinking if I don't, those homes may flood. She looked toward the window. The lake was barely visible now, a black sheet beyond the cottonwoods. Will the HOA pay you back? I almost said yes because that would have made the room easier to stand in. Instead, I said, they should. Nora knew me well enough to hear the missing word. But. She sat across from me and tapped Ron's report with one finger. Dad, if you already know what's going to happen and nobody else will stop it, then what are you waiting for? 16 years old, and she cut through the whole boardroom. I called Travis before I could talk myself out of it. Be there at sunrise, I said. The trucks arrived while Cottonwood Shores was still sleeping. Gravel haulers, a compact excavator, 2 pickups, men stepping into mud with coffee in one hand and shovels in the other. Travis got straight to work. I set orange cones along Lake Road, took video of the site before the first bucket moved, and emailed Vivian one final notice. Emergency stabilization beginning now due to imminent road failure risk. All prior reports attached. At 8:17, Vivian's white SUV rolled up. She stepped out wearing boots too clean for the ground under them. What do you think you're doing? Stopping the road from washing out. You have no authority to perform work on HOA-controlled property. Then get your contractor here. Her mouth tightened. You know that isn't how this works. I pointed toward the exposed void under the road. That's exactly how this works. Water moves, dirt leaves, roads fall. You can call it procedure after the ambulance gets stuck. Travis paused near the excavator, watching. Vivian looked at the crew, the cones, the camera in my hand. You will be held responsible for this. I'm already responsible, I said. That's why I'm here. She stood there another few seconds, furious because she had no safe command to give. Stopping the work would put her name directly on whatever happened next. Letting it continue made her look weak, so she chose the third option. She took photos, got back in her SUV, and left. By sundown, the culvert was braced, the embankment compacted, the spillway reinforced with rock and fabric, and the shoulder packed firm under Travis's roller. It was not fancy. It was solid. The storm hit before dawn Monday. For 3 days, rain hammered the roof, filled the ditches, and pushed Cottonwood Lake high against its banks. I checked the spillway every few hours. The water rushed through the channel hard and brown, but the road held. The lower homes stayed dry. Emergency access stayed open. When the sky finally cleared, Earl Mason met me near the gate and looked down at the repaired spillway. You saved them, he said. I was too tired to feel proud. No, I said. I bought them time. I did not know then how expensive that time would become. 2 days later, I paid Travis Boone $11,000 by wire transfer. And the moment that money left my account, the danger under the road was gone. The danger inside the HOA was just getting started. For 2 days after the storm, Cottonwood Shores acted almost normal. People drove over Lake Road slower than usual, looking down at the fresh rock and compacted shoulder. A few stopped by my place with coffee, handshakes, quiet thanks. Earl Mason came first. He stood at my fence line, looked toward the repaired spillway, and said, "3 homes didn't flood because you moved before they did. That won't mean much if they stick me with the bill. It'll mean plenty when people find out they tried." I wanted to believe him. That night, I built the reimbursement package like a contractor building a case file. Ron Calder's report went on top, then the photos from before the repair, the emails to Vivian, the certified mail receipts, the meeting agenda, Travis Boone's invoice, the proof of wire transfer, and a short request for reimbursement. No insults, no threats, just the facts. I mailed 1 copy certified. I emailed 1 copy to Denise and copied the full board. I kept the originals in a blue folder on my desk. 11 days passed. On the 12th morning, an envelope from Cottonwood Shores HOA sat in my mailbox. White paper, blue logo, Vivian Hartley's signature in the bottom corner. I opened it in the driveway. The first sentence told me everything. "The board has reviewed your request and determined that reimbursement is denied." I read the letter once, then again, then slower. According to Vivian, my repair work constituted an unauthorized modification to HOA-controlled property. The board had not voted. The contractor had not been selected through approved procedure. The expense had not been authorized in advance. Therefore, Cottonwood Shores had no financial obligation. At the bottom, she added 1 more line. "Further unauthorized activity near Cottonwood Lake may result in fines, suspension of amenity privileges, and enforcement action." I stood there holding that letter while the morning wind moved through the cottonwoods. Suspension of amenity privileges. That meant Nora's kayak, our dock walks, the fishing cove, the same lake my dues helped maintain, the same lake I had just kept from flooding 3 families. I went inside and laid the letter on the kitchen table. Nora came downstairs with her backpack over one shoulder. "They answered?" I nodded. She read the first page. Her expression changed before she finished. "They're not paying?" "No." "But you saved the road." That part didn't make it into their conclusion. She read the last line, and her jaw tightened. "They can take away the lake?" "That's what they're claiming." She looked out the window toward the water. Her kayak sat upside down on the rack near the shed, red against the weathered wood. "That's not right." No, it wasn't. But it was useful. Vivian had finally put her arrogance in writing. That afternoon, the first violation notice appeared taped to my front gate. Disturbance of shoreline vegetation. I stared at it for nearly 10 seconds before laughing once under my breath. The shoreline vegetation was a patch of mud Travis had stabilized to keep the road from falling into the drainage channel. The fine was $250. 3 days later, a second notice came. Improper storage of recreational equipment near Lake Corridor. Nora's kayak. That one did not make me laugh. I drove to the clubhouse and found Vivian in the office, standing beside a wall of framed community photos. Cottonwood Lake at sunset. Children on the dock. Kayaks lined along the water. Every image selling the same thing she was now threatening to take away. I held up the notice. "You're fining my daughter's kayak now?" Vivian did not flinch. "The board is enforcing Lake Corridor standards. That kayak has been there 2 years. Past tolerance does not create future permission. Convenient timing." Her eyes sharpened. "Mr. Keller, you chose to escalate this situation. I repaired a failing spillway. You performed unauthorized work on association-controlled property." There it was again. Controlled, not owned. I stepped closer to the desk, keeping my voice low. "Vivian, show me the deed." For the first time, something changed in her face. Not much. A pause. A blink held half a second too long. "The governing documents are clear." That wasn't my question. "Show me the deed that says the HOA owns the lake corridor." She recovered fast, but not cleanly. "You are not entitled to interrogate the board president." "I'm entitled to know what property you're fining me over." Her hand moved to the edge of a folder on the desk. "This meeting is over." "It wasn't a meeting." "Then consider this your warning. Any further noncompliance will be documented." I looked at the framed lake photos behind her. For years, those pictures had made Cottonwood Shores look peaceful. Now they looked like evidence. I left without another word. That evening, I called Claire Whitman and read her the denial letter line by line. She asked me to send photos of the violation notices too. 20 minutes later, she called back. "The reimbursement denial is weak," she said. "The kayak notice is petty, but the language is interesting. Controlled property, yes. Also corridor. Authority, privileges. They keep avoiding ownership language. You noticed that too." I did. The room went quiet around me. Claire continued. "Mason, pull every document you have. Covenants, plats, bylaws, amendments, lake rules, maps, anything from closing. Do not argue with Vivian again until we know what land she is actually talking about." I looked toward the blue folder on my desk. The $11,000 had started this, but Vivian's letter had opened something bigger. By midnight, my dining table was covered in HOA documents, old closing papers, plats, and lake access rules. I was not looking for revenge. I was looking for the one word Vivian refused to say. Ownership. By 1 a.m, my dining table looked like a county clerk's office had exploded across it. Bylaws, closing documents, lake rules, HOA amendments, maps from my purchase file, old meeting minutes I had downloaded years ago and never read twice. I circled every phrase Vivian liked to hide behind. Lake Access Authority, Community Management Zone, Association-Controlled Corridor, Amenity Privileges. Not once did the document say the HOA owned the strip leading to the boat ramp. That was not proof yet, but it was a smell in the air, the way wet dirt tells you a pipe is leaking before you see water. The next morning, I drove to Claire Whitman's office with 2 folders and a bad feeling. Claire's office sat above a farm supply store. No marble, no glass wall, just file boxes and a woman who could read a deed like other people read weather. She spread the papers across her desk. "This denial letter," she said, tapping Vivian's signature, "is sloppy in one place and careful in another." Meaning? She cites the HOA's authority to regulate access. She cites the board's power to suspend privileges. But when she talks about the land itself, she never says common area. She never says association-owned property. She says controlled, could be habit. Claire looked at me over the top of her glasses. People who write enforcement letters for 7 years do not accidentally avoid the strongest word they have. She pulled the plat map from my purchase file and flattened it under both palms. "Show me the spillway." I pointed. "Show me the road." I traced Lake Road around the lower bend. "Show me the boat ramp." I moved my finger to the north shore, where the gravel access cut from the road down to Cottonwood Lake. Claire leaned closer. "What is that narrow strip?" "That's the lake corridor. According to the HOA, according to everybody, that's not an answer." She turned the map slightly and followed the strip with a pencil. It ran like a thin scar from Lake Road to the boat ramp between my pasture fence and the HOA dock area. Small, forgettable, barely wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass. Claire tapped the parcel label. "This number doesn't match the HOA common parcels." I felt the room tighten. What does that mean? It means we need the original subdivision plat, the transfer deed to the HOA, and every easement connected to this strip. I pulled out my phone. County recorder? County recorder. Before I left, Claire gave me a short list. Original developer filing, common area transfer, access easements, dissolution records if the developer no longer exists, tax parcel history. Then she paused. And Mason? Yeah? Do not mention this to Vivian. I almost smiled. Wasn't planning to. No, I mean it. Right now she thinks she is punishing you with fines. Let her keep thinking this is about fines. On my way home, my phone buzzed. Another HOA notice. This one was not taped to my gate. It came by email, subject line in all caps. Final warning. Lake access privileges subject to suspension. I pulled over before opening it. The letter claimed I had disturbed protected shoreline, stored unauthorized recreational equipment, and created an unsafe work zone near the lake corridor. Unless I paid the fines and submitted a corrective plan within 10 days, the board would suspend my household's lake access. My household. That meant Nora. I called Claire from the shoulder of the road. She just threatened lake access again. Good. Good? It means she's committing to the language. Forward it to me. I did. Then I drove straight to the spillway. The repaired bank held firm under the afternoon light. Fresh stone lined the culvert. The road was solid. People were using it already, driving over the thing Vivian had refused to save. Earl Mason's truck rolled up beside me. He got out slowly, looked at the phone in my hand, and said, "Another notice? She's going after Nora's kayak now." His face hardened. That woman's got no bottom. She might have a weak spot. Earl looked toward the lake corridor. What kind? The paperwork kind. He nodded once as if that was the only kind worth trusting. She's been charging lake fees since I moved here, Earl said. Dock fees, access fees, preservation fees. Every year a new name. Who approved them? Vivian usually. Board rubber stamped the rest. Did anyone ever ask what land the HOA actually owned? Earl gave me a tired look. Mason, most folks here don't ask questions. They just pay before the lien letter comes. That sentence stayed with me all night. At home, Nora was sitting on the porch steps beside her red kayak. The violation notice had turned something simple into evidence. A 16-year-old's boat had become Vivian's pressure point. She really can stop me from using the lake? Nora asked. I looked toward Cottonwood Lake, then down at the folder in my hand. I don't know yet, but you're going to find out. That I can promise. I went inside, placed Vivian's latest warning on top of the folder, and wrote one word across a yellow legal pad. Ownership. By sunrise, I was heading to the county recorder's office. Vivian thought she had forced me back into compliance. What she had actually done was point me toward the one record nobody in Cottonwood Shores had bothered to read. The county recorder's office opened at 8. I was there at 8:03 with Vivian's lake access warning folded in my jacket pocket and Claire's list written across a yellow legal pad. Original subdivision plat. Common area transfer. Access easements. Developer dissolution records. Tax parcel history. A clerk named Sandra led me to a terminal and asked what I was trying to prove. I told her the truth. I'm trying to find out who owns a strip of dirt everyone drives across. She nodded like that was a normal sentence in her world. Those are usually the ones that cause trouble. For the first hour, Cottonwood Shores looked ordinary on paper. 24 lots around the lake. Common area near the clubhouse. Utility easements. Drainage easements. A platted dock area. Nothing that shook the ground. Then the original plat loaded. I zoomed in on the narrow corridor from Lake Road to the boat ramp, the same road Vivian claimed to control, the same path Nora walked with her kayak, the same strip the HOA used for every dock day, fishing event, and lake access fee they had ever collected. The parcel number was different. Not HOA common area, not clubhouse property, not association reserve land. It was its own strip, thin and ugly on the map, the kind of piece developers forget after selling the pretty lots. I stared at it until Sandra leaned over. "You found something?" "Maybe." She looked at the number, typed it into a different database, and frowned. That one did not convey with the HOA common parcels. My pulse moved once, hard. "Who owns it? Let's follow it." That took another 2 hours. The original developer, Cottonwood Bend Development Group, had held the strip when the subdivision was built. Years later, most common parcels transferred to the HOA. The clubhouse land, the dock pad, a maintenance shed. But the corridor did not. It stayed behind. When the developer dissolved, leftover assets were distributed among investors. The corridor went to a family trust tied to one of the original partners. That trust later dissolved too. Sandra printed the final transfer record and slid it across the counter. Grantee, Dorothy Lane. Address, Havre, Montana. I read the name twice. "Who is Dorothy Lane?" Sandra shrugged. "According to tax records, the current owner. She owns the lake corridor? She owns that parcel. The HOA has been using it for almost 30 years. Sandra gave me the tired look of a woman who had seen too many people confuse habit with title. "Use is not a deed." I almost laughed, but nothing about it felt funny yet. I paid for certified copies of everything. Original plat, parcel history, transfer records, tax records, developer dissolution filing. By the time I walked out, the folder under my arm felt heavier than $11,000. Claire was waiting when I reached her office. She read the records in silence. The longer she read, the less she blinked. Finally, she put the transfer document down and said, "The HOA does not own the access corridor." I sat back. "Say that again." "They do not own it. Unless there is an easement we have not found, they have been managing access across private property. Can they claim historical use?" "They can try. But that depends on permission, records, signage, maintenance, many things. Right now, the title is clear. Dorothy Lane owns the strip, and Vivian has been fining people over it." Claire tapped Vivian's latest warning with one finger. She has been claiming control over property the HOA apparently never received. That sentence changed the temperature in the room. We found Dorothy Lane's phone number through the tax mailing address. Claire made the first call while I sat across from her desk, listening to half the conversation. "Mrs. Lane, my name is Claire Whitman. I'm an attorney in Miles City. I'm calling about a parcel you own near Cottonwood Lake." A pause. "Yes, ma'am. A narrow access strip." Another pause. Claire's face shifted. "You received tax notices for it?" She covered the receiver and looked at me. She says she always wondered what that little tax bill was for. Dorothy agreed to a video call that evening. She was 79, silver-haired, clear-eyed, sitting at a kitchen table with lace curtains behind her. Not confused, not helpless. Just surprised that a piece of land she had inherited decades ago had become the center of a fight she never knew existed. Claire walked her through the records. I explained the spillway, the ignored warnings, the repair, the denial letter, and Vivian's fines. Dorothy listened without interrupting. When I finished, she looked down at the copy of the plat Claire had emailed her. "So they've been acting like they own something that belongs to me?" Claire answered carefully. Based on the records we have reviewed, yes. Dorothy's mouth tightened. And collecting money for access? That appears to be the case, Claire said. We still need more financial records to confirm the details. Dorothy looked at me then. You paid to fix their lake road? I paid to keep homes from flooding. And she punished your daughter for a kayak? I did not answer right away. Yes, ma'am. Dorothy leaned back. For the first time, I saw anger behind her eyes. Not loud anger. Older than that. Cleaner. My husband taught school for 41 years, she said. He used to say the worst bully is the one who hides behind a title. Claire stayed quiet. Dorothy looked back at the plat. What can I legally do? Claire did not smile, but I saw the answer forming. You can control access to your property. You can grant permission to someone else to manage it. You can require written terms. You can demand records. You can stop unauthorized use. Dorothy nodded once. Then send me whatever I need to sign. I looked at Claire. Claire looked at me. Neither of us spoke for a second, because we both understood what had just happened. Vivian's power over Cottonwood Lake had been built on a road she did not own, and the woman who did own it had just decided she was done being invisible. Claire moved fast after Dorothy's call. By Monday morning, she had drafted a management agreement, giving a new resident group limited authority to control access across Dorothy Lane's strip. Not the lake, not the homes, not anyone's private dock, just the narrow dirt and gravel corridor from Lake Road to the boat ramp. That strip was enough. Dorothy signed in front of a notary in Havre. Claire received the scanned copy by noon, then couriered the original. The language was clean. Written permission, private property, revocable access, safety review, temporary closure pending legal clarification. No drama, no threats, just paper. The kind Vivian should have read before she built a kingdom on assumptions. Earl Mason helped me call the first resident meeting at his barn. We did not invite the board. Not yet. We invited people who had already seen the documents. Earl, June Porter, Jim and Paula Reeves from the lower homes, the Holloways, and a handful of others who were tired of paying fees and getting silence. Claire stood beside a folding table and laid out the records. Original plat, parcel history, Dorothy's title, signed management agreement, Vivian's fines. The room stayed quiet until June Porter, a retired bookkeeper with sharp eyes and no patience for nonsense, tapped the HOA fee schedule. You mean we've been paying lake access fees for a road they don't own? Claire answered carefully. That is what the records appear to show. Earl crossed his arms. Then what happens now? I looked at the group before answering. Now we protect the evidence and control the access legally. Nobody cheered. That was not the mood. It felt heavier than victory. It felt like the first board pulled loose from a rotten wall. The steel gate went up 3 days later. Travis Boone sent 2 men and a post driver. We placed the gate exactly where Claire marked it, inside Dorothy's parcel line, far enough from Lake Road not to block traffic and close enough to stop unauthorized lake entry. The posts sank deep into the ground with hard metallic thuds. A rectangular sign went on last. Private property access by written permission only. Contact Cottonwood Resident Access Group. I stood there with Claire's folder under my arm, watching dust settle around the fresh steel. Nora stood beside me, her red kayak strapped in the back of my truck. So nobody can use it now? She asked. Not nobody, I said. Just not Vivian's way. She nodded slowly. By mid-afternoon, Vivian's white SUV came down Lake Road fast enough to throw gravel. She stopped hard in front of the gate. The driver's door opened, and she stepped out with her clipboard already in hand. Her sunglasses hid her eyes, but not the anger in her jaw. What is this? A gate? Do not play games with me, Mason. I'm not. She marched up to the sign, read it once, then turned on me. You have no authority to block a community amenity. This gate is on private property. This is Cottonwood Shores Lake Access. It's Dorothy Lane's access strip. That name hit her like cold water, but she recovered fast. I don't know what stunt you think you're pulling, but the HOA has managed this corridor for decades. Managed, Claire said, stepping forward. Not owned. Vivian's head snapped toward her. And you are? Claire Whitman, counsel for Mr. Keller and the Resident Access Group. Vivian gave a short laugh. Resident Access Group? There is no such entity under the HOA bylaws. Correct, Claire said. It isn't under the HOA. For the first time, Vivian looked past me and saw the neighbors standing along the fence line. Earl, June, the Holloways, the Reeves family. People she was used to seeing quiet in folding chairs now standing on gravel, watching her without flinching. Her face tightened. You people have no idea what you're doing. June spoke from behind me. We're learning. Vivian pointed at the gate. Remove it immediately, or I'll call the sheriff. Claire handed her a copy of Dorothy's signed authorization. You should review this first. Vivian did not take it. I'm calling our attorney. Do that, Claire said. Vivian stepped away, phone already at her ear. We heard pieces of it. Unauthorized obstruction. Hostile group. Community lake. Emergency injunction. Then her voice rose. No, I want it removed today. She hung up and glared at me. You've made a serious mistake. I looked at the gate, then the sign, then the folder in Claire's hand. No, I said. I made a record. 40 minutes later, Sheriff Wade Harrow's cruiser turned off Lake Road and rolled toward the gate. Vivian straightened like cavalry had arrived. She walked toward him before he even shut his door. Sheriff, thank God. This man has illegally blocked access to HOA property. Sheriff Harrow was broad-shouldered, gray at the temples, and tired in the way rural sheriffs get tired from listening to people confuse loud with lawful. He looked at Vivian, then at the gate, then at me. Mason, Sheriff. Vivian cut in. He has locked every homeowner out of the lake. Claire stepped forward with the folder. Sheriff, before anyone makes a decision, you should see the county records. Vivian snapped. This is a civil association matter. The sheriff looked at her. Then I'll start with the paperwork. That was when Vivian's confidence began to drain. Not all at once. Just enough for me to see it. Sheriff Harrow opened Claire's folder on the hood of his cruiser. The wind lifted the corner of Dorothy's title record. Claire held it down with one hand and pointed to the parcel line. Vivian stood beside her SUV, arms crossed, trying to look offended instead of afraid. The neighbors stayed quiet. Even the lake seemed still behind the gate. For years, Vivian had used procedure like a locked door. Now the sheriff was reading the key. Sheriff Wade Harrow stood at the hood of his cruiser with Claire's folder open in front of him. The steel gate cast a hard shadow across the gravel access strip. On one side stood Vivian Hartley, white SUV idling behind her, phone clutched in one hand, like she still expected someone more powerful to call back. On the other side stood Earl, June, the Holloways, the Reeves family, Nora, and me. Nobody spoke while the sheriff read. That silence did more damage to Vivian than shouting ever could. Claire pointed to the plat map. This is the original Cottonwood Shores subdivision filing. The common parcels transferred to the HOA are marked here, here, and here. The access strip is separate. Sheriff Harrow followed the line with his finger. And this strip is where the gate sits? Yes, Claire said. Inside Dorothy Lane's parcel boundary. Vivian stepped forward. Sheriff, with all respect, the HOA has managed this land for almost 30 years. Every resident has used that road. We maintain the lake. We issue access rules. We collect fees. Harrow looked up. Do you have a deed? Vivian blinked. The governing documents give the association authority over lake amenities. That wasn't my question. The same question I had asked her in the clubhouse. Only this time, she could not end the meeting. Harrow turned another page. Dorothy's title record. Then the tax parcel history. Then the notarized management agreement. Vivian's voice got sharper. This is an internal civil dispute. He cannot just install a gate because he found some technicality. Claire answered before I could. Ownership is not a technicality. Earl let out a low breath behind me. Vivian spun toward the neighbors. You all need to understand what is happening here. Mason Keller is cutting off your lake access because he is angry about a denied invoice. June Porter stepped forward. No, Vivian. He showed us the paperwork. Vivian's eyes snapped to her. June, you are not on the board. Maybe that's the problem. The words landed clean. For years, people in Cottonwood Shores had swallowed fines, notices, and fees because Vivian spoke like the final page of a contract. But now she was standing on gravel, arguing tradition against a recorded title while the sheriff read the deed. Harrow closed the folder halfway. Mrs. Hartley, based on the documents provided, Cottonwood Shores HOA does not appear to own this access corridor. Vivian's face hardened. Appear? This is a civil property matter. If the HOA believes it has an easement or ownership claim, you can take that to court. Then remove the gate until a judge decides. No. One word. Flat. Final. The wind moved dust across the road. Vivian stared at him. Excuse me? Harrow pointed to the gate. The gate is on land titled to Dorothy Lane. Mr. Keller's group has written authorization from the title holder. I have no basis to remove it. This is outrageous. That may be your opinion. It is not a criminal matter. She lifted her phone. Our attorney will file an emergency action. That is your right. And if residents are denied access, then your attorney can address that in civil court. Her voice rose. People paid premium prices to live beside this lake. Harrow held her stare. Then they may want to ask why the HOA never secured the access road. That sentence hit harder than all the others, because it did not come from me. It came from the man she had called to save her. The neighbors shifted. Not loudly, just enough that Vivian felt the ground move under her authority. Jim Reeves looked at the gate, then at the lake, then at Vivian as if seeing all three for the first time. Mrs. Holloway whispered, We paid access fees every year. Vivian heard it. Her head turned. Margaret, not now. Margaret Holloway was 76 and had lived there longer than Vivian. She stepped forward with her purse clutched in both hands. No, Vivian. Now seems exactly right. Vivian's mouth opened, but no words came. Harrow handed Claire the folder back. I'm documenting what I saw today, he said. No trespass enforcement against the gate. No removal. No criminal action. Everybody stays calm, and if the HOA wants to proceed, it goes through the courts. He looked at me. Mason, keep your records straight. Yes, Sheriff. He looked at Vivian. And Mrs. Hartley, do not tell residents law enforcement ordered this gate opened. We did not. Her face flushed red, then pale. For the first time since I had known her, Vivian Hartley looked smaller than her clipboard. The sheriff left 15 minutes later. Vivian stayed by her SUV, making calls that got shorter each time. The neighbors did not leave right away. They stood near the gate, reading the private property sign, staring at the access strip they had crossed for decades, without asking who owned the dirt under their tires. Nora came to my side. "So she can't take the lake from us?" I looked at the closed gate. "She can't take it by pretending anymore." Vivian finally got into her SUV. Before she shut the door, she looked at me through the windshield. "This is not over." I nodded once. For once, we agreed. Because while she was busy fighting the gate, Claire and June Porter were already asking the next question. If the HOA never owned the access road, where had all those lake fees gone? The answer did not come clean. Vivian refused the first records request. Then she delayed the second. Then Denise from the management office sent a half-complete packet with missing invoices, broken file links, and budget summaries so vague they looked written to confuse tired people. Claire sent a formal demand letter. That changed the temperature. 3 days later, boxes arrived at her office. Bank statements, vendor payments, meeting minutes, fee schedules, lake maintenance contracts. Years of paper Vivian had never expected ordinary homeowners to read. June Porter read them like a bloodhound. She had been a bookkeeper for 35 years, and within 2 evenings, she found the first bad invoice. Volunteer Shoreline Services, Lake Access Maintenance, $6,800. June circled the address. "Look familiar?" I didn't recognize it until Claire pulled a state business filing. The company belonged to Vivian's brother-in-law. That was the first crack. Then came another. A dock preservation invoice for work no one remembered being done. A spillway reserve payment from the same month Vivian claimed the HOA had no budget for repairs. 2 identical equipment rental charges with different invoice numbers. Lake corridor maintenance fees collected every year from all 24 homes. June built a spreadsheet. By the time she finished, the number sat on the screen like a loaded rifle nobody wanted to touch. More than $63,000 collected over 6 years for lake access, dock upkeep, and spillway reserves. On property the HOA did not own. For a spillway they refused to fix. For an access road they had no title to. Claire leaned back in her chair. "This goes beyond bad management." "What is it?" "Enough for an independent audit. Possibly enough for the prosecutor to review if the records support misuse." I looked at the spreadsheet and thought about the $11,000 invoice Vivian had rejected like pocket change. She had not refused because the HOA was broke. She refused because paying me would have forced everyone to ask what the reserve money was for. The annual HOA meeting was 5 nights later. Normally, 8 people came. That night, 22 of 24 homes were represented. Folding chairs ran out. People stood along the walls, quiet and stiff, like they were waiting for a verdict. Vivian sat at the front table with the remaining board members. She wore a navy blazer and the same silver pen she used the night she denied my bill. She tried to start with routine business. Earl stood before she finished approving the minutes. "No," he said. "We're starting with the lake." The room went silent. Vivian's mouth tightened. "That is not the approved agenda." Margaret Holloway rose from the second row. 76 years old, small purse in both hands, voice steady as fence wire. "Neither was charging us for land you didn't own." That did it. Claire walked to the front and laid out the documents one by one. Dorothy Lane's title, the original plat, the gate authorization, the sheriff's report, then June's spreadsheet. No shouting, no drama, just paper. Vivian tried to interrupt 3 times. Each time the room turned colder. Claire pointed to the vendor payments. Several lake-related contracts were paid to companies connected to relatives of the HOA president. Some invoices lack supporting documentation. Some appear duplicative. Some reference maintenance areas that were not actually repaired. June stepped beside her. And the Spillway Reserve account existed, she said. There was money, not enough for every long-term repair, but enough to start emergency stabilization. The board told Mason no while collecting money for the exact danger he fixed. Every face in that room turned toward Vivian. She stood too fast, chair scraping the floor. This is a hostile takeover. For years, that sentence might have worked. Not that night. Margaret Holloway looked at her and said, "No, Vivian. This is accountability." Nobody applauded. They did something worse. They agreed in silence. A motion was made for immediate removal of Vivian Hartley as HOA president, appointment of an interim board, full independent audit, and reimbursement of the $11,000 emergency repair bill. Vivian called the motion invalid. Claire read the bylaw section allowing removal by homeowner vote. Vivian demanded delay. Earl asked for ballots. The vote was counted twice. 21 in favor, 1 opposed. Vivian did not look surprised when the number was read. She looked exposed. The rest of the board resigned within minutes. Then Earl turned to the interim chair and said, "One more item. Mason's repair." This time, nobody argued. The reimbursement passed unanimously. I should have felt victory. Mostly I felt tired. Claire placed one final folder on the table. The audit package will be forwarded to the county prosecutor for review. Vivian's face changed then. Not anger, fear. Because elections can be lost. Titles can be replaced. But once the documents leave the room, control leaves with them. Dorothy Lane transferred long-term management of the lake access strip to the resident group under open rules, posted budgets, public votes, competitive bids, no family contracts. The gate stayed, but now it opened by written policy, not Vivian's permission. 3 weeks later, my reimbursement check arrived. I deposited it the next morning. That Saturday, I sat on the dock behind my house while Nora paddled her red kayak across Cottonwood Lake. The water was gold under the late sun. The spillway held. The road held. The gate stood quiet at the access strip, not as a threat, but as a reminder. Nora drifted back toward the dock and smiled. "It feels different out here." "How?" She looked across the lake. "Like nobody can take it away just because they say so." I watched the paddle cut a clean line through the water. She was right. The lake had changed hands, but not the way Vivian claimed. It had not been stolen. It had not been seized. It had been returned to the people willing to protect it honestly. I sent my HOA an $11,000 bill. They refused to pay it. And by refusing, they taught an entire neighborhood the one lesson every bully with a clipboard eventually learns. Power built on fear dies the moment people read the paperwork together.
That is the real lesson here. Mason did not sell Cottonwood Lake by being louder than Vivian. He sold it by staying steady, keeping records, asking right questions, and refusing to let reserve relay group. He paid the bill when danger was real, but he did not stop there. He followed the email, the reports, the disc, the map, and the money until the chief finally had room to stand on it all. And that matters, especially for anyone who has ever owned a home, worked a piece of land, or watched someone with a title act like common sense no longer applies. Sometimes standing your ground does not look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like a photo on kitchen table, a certified letter, a county flat, and one honest person saying, "Show me where it say that." Justice does not always arrive with noise. Sometimes it comes quietly, through patience, neighbors, and paperwork that should have been read a long time ago. So tell me this, If you were in Mason's place, would you have bet $11,000 to protect those homes or waited for the HOA to act? Comment 1 if you would have stepped in, or 0 if you would have waited. And if story about land, rights, neighbors, and quiet courage speaks to you, subscribe and stay with us for the next one.